Mayor Durkin.
Morning.
So who's driving? Heather, are you driving?
I'm not driving.
All right. Who's controlling the slide deck?
Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, Mayor Durkin. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And is someone doing an introduction? Are we okay?
I think we're waiting for a critical mass.
Sounds good.
Our co-chairs and our facilitators, we're having a final little check-in together before hopping on.
Terrific. I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'm sure I'll forget to unmute me, and then 10 people will say, "You're still muted, Mayor."
Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to get started in about 15 seconds, 20 seconds. We're just waiting for one additional co-chair of the task force to make it through the digital interwebs here to join us here on this Zoom call. And then we're going to get underway because we have a very special guest joining us this afternoon and want to be efficient with everybody's time. So hang tight for just a few more seconds and then we'll jump right in. All right, I will dispose of the niceties and just be very brief and say welcome everybody to our 10th Community Task Force meeting. I see that we have our two co-chairs, Paulina and Mayor Nichols are on the line. And so I will turn it over to Mayor Nichols to briefly share the agenda, who will then turn it over to Paulina to introduce our special guest this afternoon. Thank you. Over to you, Mayor Nichols.
Thank you, Michael. Am I unmute? Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Yes. Okay, excellent. So we've got an important meeting today. It's the final meeting of the task force before the mayor makes a decision on repair then replacement versus just going straight to replacement. So we're going to get a quick update from Heather on the status of the bridge. We're going to talk for just a moment about West Marginal Way and some of the improvements that have been made there and perhaps upcoming. We're going to get a briefing on the cost benefit analysis, which has just been, it's still warm from the printer, I gather. We're going to then have a fairly lengthy conversation amongst ourselves, talking about what we would like the mayor to consider as she is making this important decision. And then, of course, we'll talk at the end about next steps. For today's meeting, because it is going to be so interactive, we're going to ask that the chat feature be used relatively sparingly. Please raise your hand, the virtual hand raise feature. If you have a question or want to make a statement, please identify yourself when you do speak or ask a question. If you're referencing something that we see on the screen or have seen on the screen, please make it clear which item you're referring to, and we'll try and get that back up for you. For questions that do get into the chat, we will try to access those and read those questions as well. So during that conversation, we're going to try and, as we did in our first meeting, give everyone a chance to talk about what risks they think that the various options have, what attributes make them particularly attractive or not so. Paulina and I, following this meeting, will share with Mayor Durkin what we have heard from the task force. As you know, we don't vote, so we're not making a formal recommendation, but we certainly can give a sense of where the concerns are on the task force and what the mayor ought to keep in mind as she's weighing this along with all the other input that she's getting. So with that, let me turn it over to Paulina, who's going to introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Mayor Nichols. Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you all. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Well, my name again is Paulina Lopez, and I've been acting as a co-chair together with Mayor Nichols here for the Community Task Force. And I wanted to make sure that I also mentioned that I want to acknowledge that we live in the Duwamish land of the Coast Salish people, and everything we do and the decisions are also based on respecting our ancestors. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce Mayor Jenny Durkin to our meeting. And before I do that, I wanted to remind all our, together with our community task force members, to thank you, Mayor Durkin, for creating this space and acknowledge that you wanted to hear from different voices. It's important that all the people that are being impacted by this decision get an understanding of how this process is going to go, but also how the decisions are being made based on our different opinions and impacts. So I really want to acknowledge for you to create this space to hear from our different voices before you make any decisions. So moving forward, I think after this meeting, we will be together, continue to hear from our members, making sure that we give this information to you, and before you make the decisions, it will be reflected into all this. So thank you for the space. Mayor Durkin, welcome, and we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Paulina. I want to thank former Mayor Nichols for his work on this task force and current Mayor of South Park, Paulina, for their work, but also to all of you for all the time and effort you've put in, not just to this task force, but to really be thinking through what kind of impacts and what our decisions can be going long term. You know, the impacts of this the bridge outage have exacerbated all the other crises that we're experiencing right now. The health and economic impacts of the global pandemic, the civil rights reckoning that we're in the midst of, all of those have been accentuated in ways that I think none of us could have predicted but are really daily impacts for people in West Seattle, South Park, and other impacted communities. And I've had the opportunity to meet individually with some task force members, to meet with businesses and residents in West Seattle, SoDo, and other places that are impacted, as well as with the port and the workers at the port. And so I just wanted to give you again, after thanking you, give you a sense of kind of what my priorities going forward are, because your input is going to be critical to the decision making. I also want to give a great thanks to the Seattle Department of Transportation team that has really worked through this every day, first to discover the dangers that the bridge provided, but then trying to find ways moving forward. And so Sam and Heather, and to the engineering team, Matt Donahue, to the road crews that have been trying to get traffic moving better. It's really taken an all-out effort by them, and we know that it still isn't. It's far from perfect the way it's impacting everyday lives, whether it is the traffic diversions in the neighborhoods in South Park, or the traffic backups so that people who don't know whether they can get to their jobs outside of West Seattle, or doctors that can get to the hospital, or people trying to get to medical conditions, or businesses that need supplies. So we're very, very mindful of the impacts. As I move forward, the number one goal, of course, is to protect lives and to preserve public safety. And that's why we closed the bridge, because we wanted to make sure that it was safe for people to travel. And it's also why we did things like move the extra fire crews to West Seattle. But we also know that the overall public health and the equity that we need as a city is relying on us restoring the connectivity that we've lost between West Seattle and the city. And it's not just a loss for our city, it's a loss for our region and for our state and for the vital businesses both in West Seattle and at the port. We want to be minimizing the impacts that the closures will have on community, and particularly our BIPOC communities, who already have a disproportionate burden of both the environmental burdens and the health and economic burdens of COVID, as well as the other burdens that result from the systemic inequities. So that is another factor we'll be looking at long term. We want to make sure that we provide stability and confidence. And if we're going to be making a significant investment, which either of these routes is a significant investment of both tax dollars, but also time and commitment, that we want to make it in a way that is that has the longest term benefits and minimizes those impacts I've already talked about. And also that supports the other big investments that are coming in the region. For example, by the port, Sound Transit, and others who really in the coming years are investing literally billions of dollars for the improvement of the terminal, to get light rail to West Seattle. So we want to make sure that our investments work hand in glove with those other investments of public dollars and private dollars. And of course, securing the funding will be a priority. As I've told you last time I was able to meet with you, and I've told many of you individually, we've been working with the delegation since day one, trying to make sure that we would be in line for federal assistance in every form. I've talked to the governor. One reason we did the emergency proclamation was to be able to unlock state dollars if possible. We've been talking to the state delegation as well as transportation leaders in Olympia, because whatever route we take, we know we are going to need assistance on this front. So the last thing I'll say is we have tried to preserve the various options to move forward and not do things one after the other, that we would be preserving the ability to either repair or replace, and that we would also be taking the steps we needed to improve traffic in and around the community, to improve safety in those areas where we needed it, and also to be very cognizant that that lower bridge really is a lifeline, and that we be smart about how we use it, and we open it up for those who really need it and preserve it for transit, but also make sure that it stays healthy. So in this period of time, it's, as you know, really difficult to juggle all of those priorities. But moving forward, those are the things we'll be looking at, as well as the input that I've received from many of you and from your chairs based on the meetings you've had, and the conversations you'll have after today and after today's presentation also will be really important to me in assessing which of the options going forward is best for West Seattle, for Seattle as a whole, and for our region. So I want to thank you all for the work you're done. And then, and as you move forward, really look forward to your further input.
Thank you so much, Mayor Durkin. Very important to hear all these different components that will be supporting make the decisions. And it's great to hear from our end. We've been working hard as a community task force to learn things that we never knew before, and to get into details, but also to be bringing, as community stakeholders, how our communities can be protected. So I really appreciate you making the mention of that. We are going to be moving towards brainstorming session. So I'm going to give it out to my co-chair to start breaking into this.
Thank you, Paulina. I think right now we've got some time for Q&A with the mayor. And so, Michael, if you would help identify folks who have raised their hands or what have you, we can get to that.
Wonderful. Yeah, we have a few brief moments for some Q&A with the mayor. And just a reminder that the hand raising function is a gray button that says raise hand. And if you utilize that, I'll call on folks to come off of mute and ask their question to the mayor.
I'm sure this is not a shy group.
First person with their hand raised, Deb Barker, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead and ask your question and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, this is Deb Barker, Morgan Junction, West Seattle Transportation Coalition. I'm just going to jump in here because the PowerPoint we got said that the mayor wanted to hear from us. What factors or feedback do you have about the options for repairing or replacing the bridge and key issues? And I would just kind of want to clarify, you want to hear about all of those today, or is that in 2 weeks' time? I know that we have some factors that we'll have to discuss at the end of this meeting. But I just want you to know, Mayor, that people just want certainty. And that's what I can share with you right now. We want some certainty. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. I appreciate that. And I agree with the moderator. I knew when he said people aren't shy, that I was looking at you and others saying, come on. And I know it's both the feedback now, but I think the point of this today, as the co-chair said, is they want to hear from you directly and filter that back to me. And if there's things people think I need to hear now or questions that you have, please raise your hands virtually. But I think that both of the co-chairs will be facilitating this meeting to really distill your feedback on all those factors.
John Persak.
Thank you, Mayor Nichols, and thank you, Jenny Durkin, for your efforts in centering the maritime industry, as it is a very important economic driver in our region. I want to pivot over to the neighborhood concern, because even though I'm ostensibly a maritime advocate wherever I go, I'm also a Georgetown resident, and that's actually why I ended up on this task force. And Georgetown is a challenge because it's not structured geographically like other neighborhoods. We don't have a neighborhood center. We have a nexus of many centers that don't serve the needs of all residents. And it's very important that these are connected in a way that where people can maintain safety and accessing that. And also getting in and out of Georgetown, as we do not have a grocery store and we do not have healthcare facilities. So you can't get a prescription filled in Georgetown. And you can't really buy groceries here. So in that, I want to thank SDOT also and recognize them, that they've come to us, and we have a subgroup of stakeholders that are really getting down to some specific issues around the home areas, but also being able to make sure that we can access our Georgetown playfield, our arts corridor, as well as the design center and the community college. And so I guess my comment or my question is, I want to I want you to know that Georgetown often struggles to be seen because when we talk about Duwamish Valley, often it's South Park, often it's West Marshall, but Georgetown is this other small community. I just want to make sure that we're seeing.
Are you here?
I'm sorry. So anyway, I just wanted to make those remarks, and I appreciate your listening. Thank you.
So John, thank you for that. I'm going to comment on all three of them. One is maritime industry. While you're not speaking about that, I think what we saw happen with Boeing tells us that our maritime industry is even more important than ever before. If we're looking at high family wage jobs that are not tech jobs, the maritime industry is providing a disproportionate share of those now with the Boeing jobs leaving. Obviously, the Boeing jobs that remain, we're going to work to support, and there's many of those important to Seattle. So maritime industry is critical to the future of Seattle and the future of our region. And with Georgetown and SoDo, I completely appreciate, I think that this bridge outage have showed how deeply we're connected and how fragile our traffic resiliency is. And so we really will be continuing to work with you through this West Seattle Bridge challenges. But what to say to everybody that's on this call, please stay engaged as Sound Transit goes through its EIS and we start planning where we're going to be doing light rail and what the impacts are going to be. Because many of those impacts will hit the same neighborhoods and communities in a different way, particularly in SoDo and Georgetown, depending on where the route goes and what roads are torn up and how often traffic is disrupted, as well as some of the other areas in West Seattle that could have closures as they build a new Sound Transit way, whether it's bridge and tunnel, bridge and at grade. So please stay engaged. This is just one of those intricate decisions we're going to be making that will have long-term impacts on your communities.
David Beestock?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for being with us, Mayor Durkin. I've elevated this in other conversations, but as part of the Reconnect West Seattle plan is having a lot of folks working from home. What I'm hearing from a lot of families that we serve, particularly in High Point and in low-income housing, is a lack of internet access, adequate internet access. I know your office just put out a big, robust plan for internet for all, but the Internet Essentials plan from Comcast and other low-cost options just don't work for families. And so I'd love to see more support from the city, just as we're figuring out these infrastructure projects for how to support families and students who are all working from home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for continuing to raise that. And it's really timely because the meeting I have after this is with Superintendent Juneau. She's one of the great partners we're going to have to figure out that connectivity. And when you and I spoke before, we will continue to work with Seattle Housing as well as all those partners, because, you know, it is just, internet is equity. And we've got to do better as a city and a region.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I don't see any other of the hand raised, but I see actual hands.
Physical hands are going up.
Yes. Diane? There you go.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Good afternoon, Mayor. So I'm Diane Sosney with SEIU Healthcare 1199 Northwest. So I shared with the committee last week when I joined. SEIU represents, our local represents 1,000 healthcare workers who live in West Seattle or surrounds. It actually may be larger, and have to, most of them commute to get to their healthcare jobs. And then with our other SEIU members, there's another 1,000. So over 2,000 people who are in what we, and I think the community and policymakers would consider essential jobs, can't be done from home, can't be done virtually. And I know there's many others who residents here who are in similar situations. But I think when we look at the various scenarios and appreciate all the staff work and detail and drilling down and the cost, that the financial impact to workers and thus to the economy is huge. And I really appreciate your remark about Boeing and the impact that that will have on our communities and state. So what we're, trying to look at through the lens of obviously racial justice and equity, and also socioeconomic. There's obviously a business piece to this that we are totally supportive and want to see our businesses over here thrive. But also to think about how we can get things moving quickly. I don't know if there's any possibility of some type of hybrid. It sounds a little, out there. And yet we want to have something, we want to use money in a good way. We want to build towards a long-term sustainability, but at the same time, we also need to get going. So those are our thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane, for that. And, your workers, when I talked about John, yours are all, I consider your workers are high tech because they're doing some of the most important work there is. Look, it is the real challenge is the lack of access, and how do we make sure that we keep that limited space for people that are critical, particularly during COVID. We wanted to make sure that we could have healthcare workers get to hospitals, and Sam's here. He'll probably talk to you later on an ongoing basis on ways we're trying to work with hospitals and employers to get more of the vans to circulate and take people at stated hours, whether it's for appointments or work. But we're looking at every option. Everything we will do will be a hybrid because we will continue to, whatever we do, repair or replace. We are going to have to increase transit. We're going to have to increase the people who are using bikes. And we're really working with county and metro to make sure that we can continue the foot ferries even through the winter. And if there's additional ways to get more connectivity there. So it's got to be in all of the above. And it is an equity issue. You're absolutely right about that. And it is also something that is going to impact the health of our economy, in particular for workers. So, as we keep going through this, we will really look forward to the engagement of you and your members, because, you provide a very important part of not just the economy, but the health of the region.
Jen Temple, to be followed by Peter Goldman and West Seattle Junction.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you, Mayor, for joining us today. I'm representing West Seattle Bridge Now, and really appreciate your commentary on equity and the different crises that we've all been facing as a city and as a region. As you can imagine, for West Seattle in particular, having the bridge out is just one more big crisis that's sitting on our shoulders and weighing on all of us. So I'll reiterate, I think Deb, who said, having some certainty around this is going to be important. One of the things that I hope that we're going to be talking about today is I keep hearing this word or, repair or replace. And so I'd really like to understand why the work can't be done in parallel, because we really can't afford to wait to have something that takes as long as a replacement and have not real alternatives along the way as options to be bringing and restoring equity to our mobility in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Sam will I think you guys will get walked through kind of the options, what's left, what's on the table, kind of. We've been pushing really hard not to do an or, that we are able to pursue both at the same time, because I agree with you. Too often things that happen one after the other, we end up in the typical kind of Seattle circle of, not making enough progress. And so we will be pushing very hard to make sure that we're not just looking, a real factor for me today is not just when can we restore some of the connectivity, but how long will it last and how much is it going to connect with what we know are future changes, the new terminal, the new light rail bridge. How do we make sure that our built environment isn't, I mean, we know it's changing from what it is today, and how do we take advantage of where we are today, but be looking down the road and making sure that we're making decisions that will last with those other things that are coming. And thank you again for the equity. I just think that it's every conversation we have right now around all these big infrastructure changes and small changes, whether it's education or policing, I think we have got to center equity, and we've got to be very intentional as a city on how we do that, not just in the choices we make, but when it comes to granting the contracts down the road to doing it, that we really are living through on our promise of equity.
Peter Goldman, to be followed by West Seattle Junction and Marcy Carpenter, and that probably will take us pretty close to the end of the time we have with the mayor.
Indeed, yeah, that will take us to time.
Well, thank you, SDOT and Mayor Durkin for the transparency of this process. I think we have a little cart before the horse problem here, though, because we don't have any numbers in front of us. We don't know, nor do we really have solid estimates of time. We don't know what capital costs of the alternatives would be. They're blanks in our slideshow. So we don't know what those numbers are. I don't know how we can assist you in or making a recommendation on CBA when we don't have the dollar figures. So there might be a timing issue. They might not have been prepared in time for this meeting today, which is fine. But if you are going to look at dollar figures in a vacuum when we haven't seen those figures, then I don't know how you are seeking our input as a community task force. And there are some other concerns. We also, I think, should have a fair shot at questioning or verifying the time of repair, the time of replacement, the how difficult some of the alternatives are on modes. Anyway, I think we're jumping ahead of ourselves here, unless I'm missing something, but I understand the numbers were just prepared last night, so we haven't seen them yet. But I think that's a really major issue. So it asked the timeline of this committee to be prolonged so that we can have meaningful input and timely input. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I'm happy for input at any juncture, and I haven't seen the final slide deck. But obviously, the whole purpose of this was to be not just as transparent as possible, but to actually get the genius that's around this table. And so I'll talk to your chairs about ways to make sure that as the information comes available, if there's another ability to get input, I'm not only open to it, I very much welcome it.
Thank you. West Seattle Junction to be followed by Marcy, and then we'll move on and thank the mayor for her being with us today.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor, for being with us. Really appreciate this. Usually I don't talk on these group Zoom meetings, but I will for you. I just want to say thank you so much.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Laura Radford. I'm the Executive Director of the West Seattle Junction Association.
Thank you, Laura.
So I just want to thank SDOT for their time that they've spent with the small businesses, and especially with the low bridge passes. I can't tell you enough, Mayor, how important those passes have been. And we put those into effect as soon as I got them in my hand. We only have 6 for the 230 businesses that we have in the junction, but they have been an absolute lifeline to the ongoing vibrancy of our district. And also it gives the small businesses a sense of support that they have something that they can use to go across the low bridge and get their supplies to bring back to West Seattle. So I just want to take a moment and say thank you, SDOT, and thank you, Mayor Durkin, for not forgetting about the small businesses, and understand that we're an extremely important part of this conversation.
Thanks, Laura. And I want to thank you for organizing, meetings that I've had with the small businesses and others that have called. Everything from I advocated with the governor to extend the opening hours for some of the restaurants because I saw what that did to the ability to make money and keep the doors open and keep people working. And on this, we're going to continue to try to be creative to find some ways to use the limited mobility that we have to really be thinking creatively on how we really support community, how we support, the senior center and the small businesses, the workers that need to get back and forth to Seattle. So this is not the end of a conversation. This has been bad. It's been awful for West Seattle. And the worst part about it is there's no immediate fix. So we know that there's going to be ongoing negative impacts, and we want to continue to work with businesses and residents and community to really, as we go, learn from it and keep adapting and changing and find ways to do it better. Because no matter what options we take here, we're in this for a period of years. And it is one of the things that the hardships will continue past COVID and will continue to aggravate what happened during COVID. So you have my commitment that we're really going to continue to listen and see what things we can do better. So we know that we're going to learn as we go along.
Marcy Carpenter.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Durkin. This is Marcy Carpenter. I speak with a lot of people who aren't necessarily members of community organizations, people who are transit riders or who would like to be transit riders and others. What I'm hearing are a few things. One, for transit riders, that the low bridge is working okay. And as long as the capacity standards are maintained, people feel okay about that for as long as it needs to be there. And and a desire for more van shuttles. As you know, a person can live within the technical geographic range of a bus stop, but be down or up a very steep hill. And many older people in West Seattle and others are in a situation where they live technically what's supposed to be within walking distance, but it's in reality, it's not. So people wanting some kind of all-day service to be in the neighborhoods more than just, on California Avenue and Alaska and stuff. And I also talked with a lot of people about, the repair and replace. And people want, I think almost uniformly, people want the bridge to be reopened as soon as possible. But there are also a number of folks who don't think it's very equitable to just kick the replace can down the road and foist that 3+ year closure time on, the next generation or the next, whenever it happens. So there's a real, I don't know, there's a, people feel really conflicted about that. And I do too. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I know there's no easy solution because, and it's one of the things we're balancing. Obviously, if there's clear-cut things, it's, you spend X hundreds of millions of dollars and it's only going to last 5 years versus, increment in the last 40 years, we can each see the ebb and flow of that. And that's where we're really looking at this range of factors, and the cost benefit analysis was, how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? How long is it going to last? Are kind of the 3 elements, but buried beneath each of those are some uncertainty, a lot of risk, and a lot of factors about the built environment today versus even 5 years from now or 7 years from now. On the mobility in and around West Seattle, that's a really good point that we've got to keep our eyes on. And Sam's on here, so I'm going to make a note to him to talk to Metro about what ways we can do to get people to transit. I will close by saying this: on the November election, I'm not saying to vote yes or no, but there is a very important ballot measure that has and continues our investment in the Transportation Benefit District. And in that, it has some particular things that are to increase mobility around West Seattle during this period of time. So I hope you all, remember that that's on your ballot. I do want to thank you again. I know you've got a lot to cover today. I'm mindful, Peter, of what you said. This is, look, I'm not asking you to make comments on what you don't know about. And the more information we get, I want to be able to provide it so that you can have it, because otherwise I can't get good input from you. But I think your input to date has been really valuable. And I'm looking forward to kind of the results of the brainstorming today. And then I'll talk to your co-chairs and to Sam going forward on, if we need to have some additional ways to get input, we'll do it. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm really sorry that on top of everything that this has happened and we're facing such a difficult, impactful thing. And that whatever options we take, it will last for years. And so please know that I really care about it. The city cares about it, and any innovative ideas you have now and into the future that we can get better mobility in and around, West Seattle and adjoining neighborhoods, and really, do what we need to do to protect those neighborhoods that were communities that are now, drive-throughs like South Park. We're in this together, and we've got to come with common solutions together. So thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor, for your time. We know you have a fair number of things on your plate, some of which even approach this in terms of their impact on the community. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Paulina, I think it's over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks so much for those comments, those questions. I think the format of the meeting today would allow for all of us to be able to have more deeper conversations with information. And that's exactly how we design it. We want to have an opportunity to hear from every single one of you. And so Greg and I have been designing together with SDOT leadership and how to make that happen. So we're going to be switching to Heather, who's going to walk us through all the findings, and then we'll have a deeper engagement with all of our community task force members. So Heather, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Paulina. I appreciate it. This is Heather Marks. I am the director of the West Seattle Bridge Program for Seattle's Department of Transportation. And so today I want to talk through a little bit about the status of the bridge project. And then I also want to turn it over to first Barbara Moffett, who is a licensed civil and structural engineer with Stantec. She is one of the co-chairs of our technical advisory panel. So she's here to talk about what the TAP is up to. And then I'll turn it over to Greg Izzo, who is a licensed professional civil engineer. And he is going to talk through the factors around each of the alternatives, as well as sort of the pros and cons and the risks that we're thinking about. I appreciate everybody's desire for numbers, but I also want to note that before we get too fixated on the numbers, it's really important to understand the context, because the cost of the bridge, both initial capital, life cycle, and maintenance and operations costs, are just part of what the mayor is going to have to take into consideration as she moves through this decision. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So this slide has two pictures on it, and the first picture is of a crane barge passing underneath the work platform that's suspended underneath the West Seattle high-rise bridge. A lot of the work related to the carbon fiber reinforced polymer wrap is happening from those work platforms. In addition, we're attaching, I think we could safely call them bolts, through the box girders to attach what you see in the second picture, which are some brackets that will live inside the box girders to attach the post-tensioning strand. So all of that work is proceeding as expected and as planned. Kramer North America is working 7 days a week. Sometimes it's hard to see the work that they're doing because they're sort of masked in those work platforms and then inside the box girder. But I assure you they are out there doing all of that work. Next slide, please. So we've also been very busy on traffic mitigation and Reconnect West Seattle. Perhaps you've noticed that we've installed radar speed signs on Sylvan, on West Marginal, Olson Place, and Airport Way, and next up will be Southwest Roxbury Street. That way we will cover many of the important detour routes and give some folks feedback about how they should probably slow down. We have done the signal improvements at the Michigan and Corson signal. We've restriped the West Marginal Way and West Highland Parkway intersection. I hope that's working better for folks. Mayor Nichols, I understand you have a question about a restricted right turn signal, and we're working with our signal engineers. There may be some infrastructure problems there that might take a little longer to address. We've also done some vegetation maintenance along the West Seattle Bridge Trail. Vegetation maintenance means we've cut back the blackberries. We've also repaved 7 panels in the vicinity of 32nd Avenue Southwest and Barton. I can tell you from my experience that it certainly needed it. We've also completed a neighborhood focus group home zone walk with South Park. That was on October 5th. And we are scheduling those same lovely socially distanced walks with Highland Park and Georgetown so that we can have some plans from our home zone program. We've also done the first phase of repaving there at First Avenue, Olson Place, and Myers Way. The second phase is planned for this weekend. That's going to be some nice new pavement that'll make that a lot more pleasant traveling surface. And we also had the first introductory meeting of the Low Bridge Access Subcommittee last week, and our next, that was sort of to get everyone together and decide on how they were going to focus. Next meeting will be next week for some data review. And just a reminder, we set up that Low Bridge Access Subcommittee because very soon we are going to install automated enforcement. The mayor just signed the piece of legislation, and that is going to allow us to more finely tune access for that low bridge so that we can provide as much access as possible. And I'm particularly looking at you, Diane Sosney, and you, Laura Radford. I think that's going to be helpful for the issues that both of you brought up. So if we go to the next slide, please. We're going to start our conversation about the cost benefit analysis. And I want to turn it over to Barbara Moffett, who is co-chair of our technical advisory panel.
Thank you very much, Heather. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the CTF for allowing me, and SDOT for allowing me to come and kind of tell you what we have been up to in parallel with the CTF. And so as you are aware, and as Mayor Durkin mentioned, our input is one component. So just as the CTF is providing input to the mayor, the TAP is also providing input to the mayor. We have been involved in the CBA as it's been developing so that we've had an opportunity to weigh in on the capital costs, the life cycle costs, the risks, had significant discussions on those, the monetization of those risks, and even some of the contingencies. So we have been involved. However, I want to make a note that our input now has taken a break from that CBA, and the TAP together as a group is coming up with the pros, cons, and considerations of the different alternatives in the CBA. So although we've had the ability to be able to provide input and recommendations and had great discussions with the consultant and SDOT, we are now in a point where we are very similar to the CTF of providing a guidance document to help guide her in her decisions as one piece of information. So I just wanted to make a note of that, that is where we are right now. I do want to state that all of the alternatives that have been considered in the CBA are technically feasible from an engineering standpoint. They all have different capital and life cycle costs and risks. And some of the comments I did see in the chat box, I would like to echo what Heather had stated, is that a dollar figure is not the only consideration. There are a lot of other considerations of how this will work. And I know Matt Donahue has been very involved from an asset management point of view of providing that input as well. There's a question of why the same alignment. I think that had been answered before. And that is really with respect to being able to compare. This is not the final decision on it must be this or it must be that. This is a repair replacement decision. And so that is something that will be considered in the future moving forward, what makes the most sense. But some of the key considerations that we are having in our guidance document include the application of the weighted attributes. So as you know, and we visited you last, we were involved in discussions on what should the attributes be, not just the costs, but what should those attributes be that are of consideration. Just as the CTF weighted them, the TAP weighted them, and then we took those weighted attributes and we looked at each of them with respect to all of the alternatives to provide a weighted score that went into development of the indices that are kind of that output of the CBA. Is how do those indices fall out from this cost benefit perspective. So those weighted attributes, we consider that kind of complete at this point. With respect to geotechnical and seismic resiliency, that is a key component in our guidance document, both from the geotechnical and seismic and structural interaction perspectives. Risks and uncertainties, I mentioned that we have been, for each alternative, they each have inherent risks and uncertainties, and that is part of what we are developing for our guidance document. And also it states the pier and superstructure connections. It's also the connections between the piers and the foundations. So there's a lot of different connectivity. I know that West Seattle wants the connectivity with the rest of the city. There's a lot of connectivity even within the structure and the way that different parts impact each other. Each of the alternatives has a different impact on the foundation and the piers. And so looking at all of that and pulling it into a document from a technical perspective is where we are going. One other thing, the last bullet on here, while it says more information is ultimately needed between the structural strengthening, ground treatment, foundation retrofits, I will say that that is not critical for this guidance document. It is something that may be in early works to continue that development. Right now, a lot of work has been done from a geotechnical perspective and a structural perspective, and marrying those together, a lot of assumptions have been made, and proving those assumptions and to move forward on whether or not foundation retrofits are needed or ground improvements. Those are things that are for the future, and assumptions have been made. The TAP has validated those assumptions to put into the CBA. So that's kind of the overall status of where the TAP stands, and we are right in step with what the CTF is doing, is pulling this together to provide to the mayor for her decision. And at this point, I will be turning it over to Greg Izzo, who will be going through each of the separate alternatives and giving a high-level overview of what some of these risks and uncertainties are and where we stand with each alternative.
And Barbara, let me just thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
And before Greg, you jump in, I see, excuse me, Councilmember Herbold, your hand is up.
Oh,
thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a quick question. Before I get to my question, I do want to underscore the statement here from the TAP that all alternatives are technically feasible from an engineering standpoint. Previous to this statement, what we had heard from the TAP was that they had not yet reviewed any documents that would suggest technically feasible. And I raise this because the council has its own independent consultant, and the council consultant earlier had been troubled that that the statements coming out publicly, not from the TAP, but from other stakeholders, that the statements coming out publicly was that there had been a determination that repair was technically feasible. And the TAP agreed with that, whereas the TAP earlier was saying something a little bit different, but it's a distinction with a difference. And it was saying you hadn't found anything that to suggest that repair was not feasible. And so I think this is a step in the direction that I think SDOT was pushing this discussion in earlier, and I just want to remark on it because it had been identified as by our independent consultants.
Barbara, are you back?
Hey everybody, this is David. I'm
Barbara.
working on the technical assistance side of things. I think what happened is some component of Zoom crashed. So what we're doing right now is trying to get everyone back into the meeting that was booted out. So we should all be back momentarily. It looks like things are working now.
"2020, am I right?" Question.
Yeah, I don't see her on my thing yet. Looks like we have a fair number back though.
Is Megan back yet? She's maybe suggesting a 5-minute break and try dialing back in 5 minutes.
That's a very practical suggestion, I think, at this point.
Let's go ahead and do
All right.
that. Everybody take a 5-minute stretch break. We'll come back at 1:05.
And we were listening to Councilmember Herbold, right? Were we all at the same point when it went?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
1:05 we'll resume with our best technical efforts and
Okay.
a little hope and a prayer. All right.
Excellent.
See everybody in 5 minutes.
It won't even let me leave.
Nothing personal, Greg. The chat's cleared. That's good.
Okay. That is good.
So the folks who have just now joined, we're taking a break until 1:05 as people are reconnecting. I'm sure there's a great explanation as to what happened. I don't know what that is, but we will reconvene, if you will, at 1:05, hopefully without the technical challenge. Michael, how do we look on in terms of people reconnecting? Uh-oh, Michael. Bill?
Yes, Greg, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Have we got the connectivity issue dealt with? Can we restart, or do we need to hold off for another minute?
Yeah, I asked Michael to go ahead and give us the green light based on input from the consultant. So I'd say I'd wait till he goes
Looks
ahead
like
and all
he's
clear.
not back on with us.
Yeah, that's yeah. Let me see if he can get back on.
Okay. All right, folks. We'll hold off for just another minute or two. Sorry about that. Barbara, when does the TAP meet next?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday?
Yeah. We have several meetings. Actually, we have 3 meetings next week. But Tuesday's our official TAP meeting.
And is Tuesday when you think you're going to get the full cost-benefit analysis and background?
We have seen a draft, and so we have been reviewing that. And as to the final one, I understand it just hit the press at like 11 o'clock last night. So we should be seeing it and be able to have a discussion on that by Tuesday.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Sarah? No. All right, did we go down again?
Looks like we did, but some of us are back.
Interesting.
It's a bit spotty.
I'm seeing on Slack from my office that they're having a Zoom issue too, so there might be a Zoom wide issue. They're trying to start a meeting.
Didn't one of the members on the CTF comment about the internet reliability?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So I had heard most of the comment as people are coming back on before I was kicked off. And so if you would like me to address that, I could do that while we finish, or do you want to wait for a few minutes?
In terms of responding to Councilmember Herbold, let's wait till she gets back on.
Thank you. That's probably a good idea.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. 2020.
And yet it is still amazing that we can do this, that we have, if COVID had hit 20 years ago, it'd be a little bit more problematic. So I'm thankful for the technology, even if it has its little quirks.
Indeed. Yeah, we usually have a big team meeting right now at work, and they're all on Slack freaking out why they can't get on. So I can guarantee it's not just us.
So 20 years ago, we probably would have exchanged postcards and been good. Councilmember Herbold, we're going to respond to your point, but we're going to give it another minute to make sure we're stable again.
Sounds good. It might be just so Barbara can respond all in one fell swoop. Maybe I could get when everybody's back, get my question out first. That was part of my comment. That'd be great. Just trying to be efficient.
We should do that. But it was nothing related to Councilmember Herbold.
No, nothing personal.
Michael, do you know what's happening also? Is the live going to be cut off or has it come back?
The live feed, did you say?
Yeah, the YouTube live. Because we posted in different sites.
I will check with our tech folks. I don't know if we're back streaming live. And I am also, just for those interested, looking on Twitter, and it sounds like there are some Zoom-wide tech challenges. So we're not unique in the pain.
Mm-hmm. As much as we'd love to be.
Zoom crashed.
Doesn't make it hurt any less.
So is the closed captioning down too? At least I'm not getting anything now.
I'm back, but I need to have someone reassign closed captioning to me.
Okay.
So if one of the hosts could do that, that'd be great.
Thank you. Bill, are you transitioning people from attendee to panelist?
I think that's Bill.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make my AirPods work.
Your what? Oh, there you go. Okay. Technology.
And if they don't, you guys will just have to hear the song of the pine siskin that's happening behind me.
We just installed a new mesh Wi-Fi in our house. And our house is laughing plastic, so it's very hard to get a good Wi-Fi signal in many parts of the house. But what it did was it cut me off from my printer. So there's always something.
Where in the woods are you?
What's that?
The YouTube live stream is back up, so I think our full systems go, knock on wood. So Councilmember Herbold, let's turn things back over to you.
We still don't have a captioning assigned. I'm your captioner.
Apologies.
Please assign captioning on Zoom. Teresa Meyer Clemens.
Do we do captioning both on the Zoom and on the YouTube?
Yeah.
It's the same system?
No.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think we're having some issues with the hosting right now, so we're trying to work through that.
Okay.
To get the closed captioning up and running.
Great, thank you. I've got it now.
Okay, good. So let's go back to Councilmember Herbold, who was in the middle of a question and a comment on the feasibility on the repair issue, I believe. Councilmember?
Thank you so much. Yes, I think I got my comment out. The question I have, though, is a question that I've also directed to SDOT, and just am interested in hearing the perspective of the TAP. There, in addition to the items that you list below, that is more information that's ultimately needed. There are some other things that we have identified that we won't know. We won't have the seasonal analysis of the impacts of temperature and weather under a proposed repair scenario. And we also, because of the timing of when the bearing is unlocked, and that's not going to be until late in October, whereas a repair replace decision is going to be made mid October. I'm just concerned that we're not going to have any experience with the sort of what happens when we unlock the bearing to apply to the decisions around repair or replace.
Okay.
Okay.
Barbara?
Thank you. Yes, and I think I'm not on mute anymore. Yeah.
Good.
So thank you for your comments, and I would like to note that our first statement that we had not seen anything that indicated it was not feasible to pursue a repair is kind of almost a double negative. It's one of those things that, we had very limited information at the beginning. And so before we even went down a potential repair route to say, are we going to pivot in this decision? Is it even something that we should be considering? And so that's what that statement was more intended to say, is that, yes, it was worthwhile to still pursue the repair route. It could have been where it is not repairable immediately. So that had been our initial statement. We have had much more information. The SDOT consultant has done a tremendous amount of work. This feeds into your particular questions. First of all, with respect to the seasonal analysis, while we will not have hit this round of temperature changes that are going to be occurring October, November, and into the winter time, there has been a tremendous correlation between the current models that have been developed by WSP and what they have been seeing to date as they have been doing the summertime temperature change from the spring into the summer. And so that correlation has provided a confidence level that would not have been in place back in June when the TAP first started, to say we do have a correlated model. And then also there's the monitoring that is going on, the structural health monitoring system that is also feeding in, and with that information that's coming from that is also another component that is helping to have a higher confidence level. So when we are making the statement here that all alternatives are technically feasible, we believe that there are, from an engineering standpoint, that the items that may come up, both with repair or replace, depending on the option, can be engineered out, if you will, from more of a lay person's speak, is that as we encounter things, that can be handled through our engineering and technology and modeling to be able to handle those. So we do believe that each one is technically feasible with pros, cons, considerations, risks, all of that. And they have different components to each of the alternatives. So, and I think your second one is the timing of the bearing being unlocked in late October. What happens? Well, having a locked bearing is not good. And so having an unlocked bearing is good. So if you go to the bad good, it will only improve the ability of us to be able to continue with monitoring. As you're aware, the stabilization that is currently underway is to prevent collapse. And so as the stabilization is put into place, the bearing becomes unlocked. We have a command center, and there is monitoring that is ongoing for that to understand what that unlocking does. But it is something that is not required from a decision point of view. This bridge will be in place. If it's going to be repaired, it will continue down that route. If it's going to be replaced, we still need the bridge to stand for a while until it could be demoed. And so the unlocked bearing is not a critical determination in a recommendation for repair or replace.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
It absolutely does.
Okay. And I will say that my co-chair and I are looking forward. We are meeting, for everyone's knowledge on the CTF, we are meeting with the council's consultant later this week to be able to provide any additional input that they may have.
Barbara, one of the things that the TAP informed us of fairly early, I think maybe your first visit or maybe even prior to that, that a repair would be good for at least 15 years and possibly longer. Has the TAP come to a conclusion on that, on how long a repair would be reasonably expected to last?
So there's, first of all, with respect to the 15 years, I guess I will say that a range is developed and provided. So it's a minimum of 15. It's a potential 40. And so there's not a set number that it will last 38.5, or a specific number for that. We are bounding it as we would in any type of a study to look at what we could a minimum get out, as well as what is the potential for how long a repair could last. Okay. I was talking with Heather the other day, and a probabilistic determination where you look at, you do a statistical analysis for a probability of failure has not been performed to come up with the number of when this could potentially fail, how long a repair would last. That is something that would take a much longer period of time. It can be done, it has been done, and yet it is not something that is necessarily needed to know the exact number in order to do a repair replace decision. If the repair route is undertaken, then could that be added on? Potentially. Is it needed? That's really a determination that SDOT would make. But so for answering on the frame of how long this would last, yeah, we do know that once a repair is in place, it is, for all effective purposes, the issues are fixed that presented themselves. Okay. Also adding on is that this is an older structure, and because this one issue is fixed does not mean there would not be other issues that could potentially occur during a 40-year potential service life. So there's a lot of factors that are that need to be considered, and so having a 15-year as a lower bound is reasonable. Having a 40 years as a potential hope for, that is reasonable as well. There's a lot of gray area in between to pick a specific number. Does that help with that range?
So you're saying that from the TAP's perspective, there's a range of 15 to 40, that once it's repaired, the underlying issue has been dealt with, mm-hmm, and therefore the 40 years would represent the life that you would have expected had this not happened.
Correct.
Okay. And then the usability of the structure. It's one thing if you get back to where it was and the kinds of flows that we had and load. It's another if you can only run one lane each direction.
Right.
So
may I just mention that Barbara is going to be with us for the rest of the meeting, and so it might be, instead of, because everybody wants to ask Barbara questions, but let's get through the description. I too have questions for Barbara. Let's get through the description of each of the alternatives, and then so that we can answer some questions, and then we'll get to the part where we have Barbara and Matt and me and Greg Izzo available to answer the range of questions. Our adventure in technology has put us about 30 minutes behind, so I just want to make sure that we can get through the content.
Sure. All right, I will defer to co-chair Heather, and we'll get back to our actual agenda. But Barb, those are questions I think that are obviously very important if we're going to give a sense of whether we think repair or going straight to replacement are the right. So, all right, then where are we Barbara, were you finishing up and we were moving to Greg?
Yep.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
Greg's turn.
My turn.
Greg Izzo.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Again, Greg Izzo. I am managing capital delivery, so I'm the program manager for the overall West Seattle Bridge program. And today I'll be talking through the alternatives and just pointing out some of the key factors here that are influencing our recommendation. Some of that related to cost and to benefit as well. So number one, the alternative one shoring option, which is the first option we looked at as far as the first of two repair options. This repair option offers the least design service life of roughly 5+ years. It does not offer a lot to us as far as longevity of the repair and service life. And it is not the lowest cost option either. So overall, as we looked at this option, the estimated capital cost did not come in the lowest, as you would expect for something that would provide such a low service life. In fact, it was higher than even the alternative 2, as you'll find out here shortly. But also the overall ownership, including capital costs and life cycle costs, the overall ownership cost of alternative 1 is also not the lowest. In other words, it comes in the middle of the pack. So if you think about that, coming into the middle of the pack of overall ownership cost, and only getting 5 years or so out of this alternative, the cost benefit just doesn't pencil out for us. And you'll see some of this in our overall performance ratings toward the end here when I cover the last slide. So again, the estimated annual O&M cost is a bit higher than even the replacement cost. So we will be tending to this structure over the life of it. So it doesn't really pencil out from an O&M standpoint as well. How long could it take to build? There's a lot of customized prefabrication that needs to go into this option, including the steel trusses, the members that need to be fabricated and assembled offsite and transported to the site. This would also be one of the first, if not the first, of this size bridge truss that would essentially be assembled to hold up this scale of a bridge structure. So there's not a lot of regional experience who have come in and retrofitted this type of shoring repair. So that adds a factor of risk that we'll need to consider, as well as just the overall regional experience and the complexities with constructability, fabrication, et cetera. How long will it last? Like I said, 5+ years is all we expect out of this. It is not meant to be a permanent structure. It is meant to be a temporary structure while we plan to replace it in 5 years or so. So that is the intent of this alternative. The biggest drawbacks, the complexity, again, the constructability, some of the logistics of just fabricating offsite and bringing it in, getting it on the structure itself, and obviously the connections. And it does not store full capacity as well. That's one of the other important factors I want to mention about this one, is that because of the framing of the trusses and the hardware that's involved, we would only be down to 3 to 5 lanes. So it would reduce lanes from what we left off with on this bridge. So we would not gain back that capacity on this alternative. And it would require a 2-phase construction approach, which is something that we talked about here as far as like the continuous impact of the alternatives. This would have to be taken down in year 5 and then have to be replaced with a new bridge. So it would be a 2-phase construction project where it would be, the public would be interrupted twice, which is not ideal and not what we want to do. Next slide, please. If we could. Okay. Okay, this is alternative 2. This was the baseline alternative that we compared all the other alternatives to. As we get down to the attributes and performance ratings, I'll go through that. This alternative came in as the obviously the least cost alternative for repair and the least cost alternative overall. It is the least cost, however, it does have one of the highest O&M costs over the service life of this alternative and compared to the other options. So as we look at the end of the overall ownership costs, including capital and operations and maintenance, it comes pretty close to at the end to being even close to the repair options when it comes to the overall ownership costs. So even though it has a very low upfront capital cost, the O&M costs are high, and so the overall cycle at the end comes pretty close to the replacement alternative. So we're going to have to figure out what the gain is of that, and using O&M money versus capital money, and some of the advantages and drawbacks of each. How long could it take? This is probably the quickest way, as we talk about the quickest way to get traffic back on the bridge. This would probably be the quickest way to get traffic back on the bridge by perhaps 2022. Mid-2022 or so. And that would include immediately mobilizing and perhaps getting out for a GCCM contract, coming up with some alternative delivery to get this design, get a contractor, and restore a live load. So it would be the quickest option. How long would it last? Like we just discussed, and we might be discussing a little bit more later. 15 years is the lower bound we put on this, but that is a code code-driven number that was placed there. It was not an engineered or a calculated service life that we came up with here. So in other words, what I'm saying is it could be less than 15, it could be more than 15. Certainty that alternative 2 carries that that makes us think a little bit about the uncertainty and how important that is to us as we go through the discussion of not wanting to close down this bridge again and pivot to replacement. So we'll talk about that a little bit more because that is the significant risk of alternative 2. The seismic performance is lower than the replacement alternatives. And again, the intent of the repair alternative is just to restore back traffic and restore back where we left off as far as the normalization of the bridge. It would basically be returned back to what it was before it was shut down. So it would not significantly improve the seismic performance or the classification of the bridge to return service to the bridge after an earthquake event. It would be back to normal. This option does require closing the bridge again after that service life is up, whether it's between the 15 to 40 or even less than that. Again, the uncertainty around that, we don't know. And that's one of the concerns we have, is not being able to plan for that next shutdown of alternative 2 if it happens. Fortunately, we have the system that would help us get ahead of that as the structure does go through more issues. We have a chance to get ahead of it and react to it, but we still don't have a much an advanced planning timeline to be able to pivot quickly. So that is a risk that we have to take on. As far as the greater uncertainty, more complexity in the future with increased density, we obviously, this option does not offer what a replacement option can as far as being able to design for future traffic forecasts, more traffic, heavier loads. This option does not sort of compatibility looking forward. So that is a risk we'll have to factor in as well. And securing funding to replace a functioning bridge is, based on our experience, more difficult than finding funding for a bridge that is already broken, where traffic has taken off. So in other words, if the bridge is already working, it's going to be difficult to find funds. And this would go against option 2 in that, if we pivoted to replacement immediately, finding with a new one may be a bit more competitive and have a better chance of getting grants and other money. Alternative 3, next slide, please. And there may not be a slide here because alternative 3 was a partial replacement alternative of replacing the midspan. However, due to the technical complexities of the connections themselves, there was too high of a risk to consider continuing that alternative through. Given those connections, we decided to take it out of the alternatives and potentially something that wouldn't work out down the road as we get deeper into design. So we decided to take that out. Also, it was not the cheapest alternative for replacement. So that was another reason as we look to alternative 4 here. Alternative 3, given the complexity in itself, it didn't end up the least cost option, and it ended up being the most risky as far as a technical repair. So we decided to take that out. Alternative 4, in the middle of the pack, I'll say, with as far as the capital cost as compared to, say, alternative 2 had a low capital cost and a high O&M. This has a middle of the road capital cost compared to all 6 alternatives, and has a lower O&M cost because it's a newer asset. The initial 2 years, we would expect a little bit higher of an O&M cost, but after that, it would tail off significantly because it is a new structure, and we expect to spend much less with O&M over the complete life cycle. How long would it take? We could return traffic for alternative 4 tough to say right now. Our traditional design bid build method of delivery would have us getting traffic back on by 2026. However, we are looking at alternative delivery methods such as design build or GCCM that would help us accelerate this, get this done a little bit faster than our traditional ways would get us. So we're pretty confident, and we're gaining more confident in time as we look at alternative ways to deliver this faster. The biggest risks and drawbacks for this is, for some reason, I'm sorry, there's a mix up of, still seeing some of slide 2 on slide 4.
You're
it's
seeing
really weird.
All of the data is slide 2, alternative 2.
I noticed that. It's okay. Okay.
I don't know why, but
yeah, that's difficult to. As far as how long it would last, again, the 15 plus lower bound was set as the code-driven lower bound, but again, this was not a calculated number. We'll talk about this a little bit later about the risks and uncertainties of the service life of alternative 2 and alternative 4. Alternative 4 should get us 50 plus years. We are replacing the superstructure itself, including the pier caps and perhaps themselves, and it would also include foundation strengthening. So we expect obviously a lot more predictability as far as the service life of this bridge because we're replacing more of it, and we have more control over the design features.
Greg, I think the cost is three of the stars, and O&M is 2 on alternative 4.
Yes. So like I said, the capital cost for this alternative is in the middle. It's less than alternatives 5, obviously the replacement in the bore tunnel or the tube tunnel, but it is more than alternative 2, obviously. So it's in the middle of the pack as far as capital costs. However, the O&M cost would be less than we would expect out of alternatives 1 and 2. And we lost our, I don't know, no longer see the PowerPoint slide.
That was on purpose. That was on purpose, Greg. Megan's reloading it. There was a rendering problem.
I want to make sure that I have, oh yeah, I do have okay, good, it's working. Sorry, for a while my microphone wasn't working. My apologies.
So there are some risks that, there are some risks that come along with alternative 4. Obviously, when we remove the superstructure itself, it presents an opportunity. And then we do have to go through a process and permitting with the U.S. Coast Guard, what's called a navigation impact report, which evaluates whether or not we have to increase the clearance on a bridge because we're basically removing the bridge and provides an opportunity to evaluate what we need to put back. So there is a risk that we'll just have to go through the process. And as time goes on, we hope to gain more confidence that we would not have to go higher. But that's still to be seen. We need to go through the process. So we monetize that risk and have included it in the alternative 4. And then the risk there is that if we have to go higher with the bridge, we would have to chase the approach spans out farther, which would significantly add cost to the project overall. So it's a risk we can't ignore, but we're hoping to work as we go down the road and mitigate that risk or eliminate it if we can, going through the process of negotiating with the Coast Guard. The FAA risk that was originally tied to this alternative, the CBA assumed that we would be putting back in place another box girder bridge, which would eliminate the FAA concern about clearance and towers. So we've decided to eliminate that risk from Alt 4. However, it will stay with Alt 5 because through the TSNL, we may have some alternatives that produce higher bridge structure that like a cable stay bridge that we would have to evaluate the FAA impacts. There are still other risks like for alternative 4 that we're going to have to monetize. However, these are risks that we can better manage and we have control over, such as the seismic. We expect codes to change over the next few years influence what we do as far as foundation strengthening, but that would add a cost to this alternative that we would have to manage and either mitigate now or mitigate later. And again, this bridge, the service life was 50 plus, but we're saying 75. And again, some of this depends on what we do for foundation strengthening. And another thing I want to point out between alternatives 2 and 4 is that we're doing post-tensioning right now as part of alternative 2. This alternative, along with the replacement alternatives, would need future strengthening after year 50. So there would be an ability or a requirement to come back and do some strengthening to this structure after 50 years of service. The biggest drawbacks, obviously, it's going to take longer. It's going to be a longer closure to replace the superstructure than, say, alternative 2. But it is still should be quicker or along the same timeline as alternative 5. We hope to be quicker because it is less scope. However, that's something that we're still evaluating. And securing funding, it is a large sum of money we're talking about here. And so, and if we do accelerate the schedule, there's going to be an expectation to obviously produce funding to be able to pay our contractors. So there's going to be a trade-off we're going to have to work through there as far as the funding for this alternative and how quickly we can start construction of it. Alternative 5, next slide, please. Alternative 5 includes the full replacement. And for this alternative, we've chosen to select the cable stayed bridge. This was the least cost alternative that made it for the full replacement option. The estimated cost is obviously higher out of all the, with exception to the tunnel option, the immersed tube tunnel. This is the highest cost capital cost option. But again, the long-term O&M for this alternative would be relatively low compared to the repair options. So the overall life cycle will end up with, again, with exception to the tunnel, overall ownership to overall cost to the owner would be slightly higher for this alternative than it would be for alternative 4. How long could it take? Again, this would be roughly on the same timeline as alternative 4, where we would, right now in our traditional delivery methods, we would have traffic back on the bridge. However, again, we're looking at alternative delivery that would likely accelerate that schedule a bit. We just need to figure out what that would be through alternative delivery methods. Costs and risks of this one are obviously longer closure. There would be new piers. So we're talking about new piers, meaning new ground we have to rip up and deal with some right-of-way issues. So there's risk there. It's a steel bridge, so there's a lot of steel components which take a long time for procurement, fabrication. So there is a length that we have to manage as far as the fabrication itself. Steel has a lot of pros to it, including the weight to strength ratio. However, it does take longer to fabricate, and a lot of it has to be done off-site. Securing funding for a larger upfront capital cost. Again, this goes back to the point of it might be better at this point to secure funding for a bridge that has no traffic on it, the replacement option, while the bridge is still operating. So I feel like this puts us in a same category as alternative 4 as far as being able to provide funding, get funding, or find grants or other state, federal sources that would help us pay for this alternative. This alternative would also include, like I said, for alternative 4, it would also include a rehabilitation or a strengthening that would have to happen 50 years into its life, similar to alt 4. Alternative 6. Alternative 6 is the immersed tube tunnel. for now, as part of the CBA, we've decided to assume this, the tube tunnel would be on the north side of the bridge, although the south side is still an option that we may want to consider to avoid impacts to, say, the port and the railroads. But for now, we've evaluated this on the north side of the bridge. This obviously has the highest capital cost, quite a bit higher than even alternative 5. And that is primarily due to the monetized risks. There are a lot of risks associated with an immersed tube tunnel option, not only going underneath the waterway, but also the cut and cover sections of the bridge that would have to happen over the island, and some of the interesting things we can come across as we excavate a lot of earthwork and dig through the island there. But overall, connections to the existing structure and hydrogen water risks and a cost that we would have to factor in here. So overall capital cost, this is a much higher capital cost than all the other alternatives, and brings along probably most of the risk as well. The maintenance cost of this, given the amount of HVAC, electrical, mechanical systems that go into an immersed tube tunnel, the operation cost, the maintenance cost of this alternative will be quite high. And it's an asset that we are not familiar with. We don't have a lot of experience with it. So that would be a challenge and a risk for us to take on as an asset owner. This obviously would take the longest time to build, especially getting through the permitting and through construction. So this is pretty far down the line, as you could see there, as far as getting service back. It would take a long time to construct and get traffic moving. It does not include, as we analyze this for the CBA, it does not include consideration of light rail. If we did consider light rail in the CBA, we would have to consider an off-site casting facility and constructing one, which would take up a lot of time and resources and probably delay and add costs. Delay and add cost to the project itself. So that's a big risk and a drawback that we would have to consider if we were to make it forward compatible for Sound Transit. Some of the other risks are the long construction duration. Again, there would be a lot of casting on site. As we get to the cut and cover sections, there would be a lot of reinforced concrete casted on site, and a lot of risk involved in trenching across the island, as we all could imagine. Securing funding for this option is such a capital cost, it would be quite a challenge for us as well. I mean, we're talking possibly 2 or more times the cost of alternative 5, so it is a high capital cost. And like I said earlier, it is a unique asset for us to maintain it as well. So that's alternative 6. I would like to move on to the summary to go over some of the attribute performance. So this is a really cool visual graph that we can check out how the attributes performed. And I'll just mention, just to remind everybody, when we attribute weighting, the CTF weighted seismic, constructability, and mobility as an order of priority attributes for the exercise. And overall, that really closely matched what the overall combined attribute scoring had, which was mobility, seismic, and constructability. So the attributes were the same. However, they may have been prioritized a little bit differently between the combined and what the CTF came up with. As you can see on the chart here, you'll see alternative 2 has all half circles filled. That's because it was the baseline. We chose alternative 2 as the baseline's performance alternative. So all the other alternatives were evaluated against alternative 2. And if we can look at this graph, you'll see most of the, if the circles are, the more filled in the circles are, the more that alternative or was chosen over alternative 2. Alternative 4, bridge maintenance, had a fully filled in circle, which meant that that attribute performed the best for alternative 4 as compared to alternative 2. And the other way around would be looking at, say, the equity slide, where Alternative 4 only has a quarter filled, whereas alternative 2 has half filled. So in this case, alternative 2, the repair option, would have come out ahead in the preferred alternative compared to 4 when it comes to equity. If we span our eyes across the complete graphic, we could see that alternative 4 has kind of the most filled in, which makes sense because it did come out as the highest performance out of the attributes and performance scoring as all the other alternatives. So it would expect to be filled in a bit more than all the other alternatives. So 4 and 5 are, from a performance standpoint, came out the highest ranking. Cost not included. All right.
Okay.
That
Thanks
covers
so,
us.
yeah, thanks so much, Greg. That's great. Can we go to the next slide, please? I'm going to kind of skip over these last couple of slides sort of rapidly because I'd really like to leave maximum time for folks to ask questions. And so if I'm going too fast, somebody just give me the high sign. So Greg gave us a lot of information about all of the alternatives. And so just to boil it down, the repair alternative 2 has lower costs now, but higher maintenance costs over the life cycle. It's quicker to get traffic back on the bridge, but the bridge will have to close again for us to actually replace it. It has lower attribute performance scores overall, especially in seismic and safety. The success depends on the bridge's reactions to repair and stabilization, which we are going to learn more about as time goes on. And the risk, there's a significant risk that SDOT perceives there to be a significant risk that the repaired structure would not fulfill the remaining design service life. And that's how we got that 40 years number. Is the original service life was 75 years. It lasted us 35 years. So the remainder there is 40 years. For replacement, which would include alternatives 4, 5, and 6, they're more expensive now, but less expensive in the long run. It'll take a little longer to get traffic back on the bridge, but we won't have to close it again. There's a higher overall attribute performance for alt 4 and 5. And success doesn't depend on the bridge reactions because we would be in a demolished situation. And there's lower risk that the new structure wouldn't achieve its designated service life. Next slide, please. So key takeaways are that there are significant concerns that remain about the ability of the repairs to last 40, 15, or even 5 years. We just don't know. And so that means that another unplanned closure is a real possibility. And I think we can all agree that would be a bad thing. All the pathways require funding partnership, and our experience tells us that replacement alternatives require more funding upfront and repair alternatives require maintenance costs that build up over time. Those are often things that folks don't want to partner on. And a replacement would be required at some point, and there are no guarantees that the process is going to get any easier. The urban environment just gets more and more complicated when things like Terminal 5 are fully functioning and there is an existing light rail bridge. Next slide, please. So if we move ahead with repair options, that includes the shoring and full repair. Full repair performs better. We do have existing contracts that could be used to quickly pivot to repair design. And we would first need to complete the stabilization work to see how the bridge responds. There is a chance that the bridge doesn't respond to stabilization. And so then we'd have to rethink our options. Next slide, please. If we pivot to replacement, the replacement options in the cost benefit analysis include that full superstructure replacement, full replacement of the whole bridge, or the immersed tube tunnel. There are other replacement concepts to explore. These are just 3. There are many, many ways that we could rehabilitate this bridge or replace it. And some of them may be able to be delivered more quickly than what we have examined in the cost benefit analysis. So designing a replacement is going to be necessary even if we decide to repair the bridge and reopen it for some period of time. That bridge, though, would eventually need to be replaced. We have selected HNTB to design the West Seattle high-rise bridge replacement option. They are on board and raring to go. The next step would be to move ahead with a truncated type size and location study and to design the bridge demolition. I want to make very clear that the type size and location study is required if we hope to get federal funding, which I assure you we do. Next slide, please. So now we are in that position of advising the mayor about her decision to repair or replace. We can go ahead with repair while moving forward with the type size and location study. If we decide to go with replace, then we'll use the mayor's decision criteria to explore the different options available in the TSNL. Then we move forward to that alternatives analysis. Okay, we've decided to replace the bridge. We're going to develop the criteria, analyze the site, and consider constraints. And we're going to determine feasible alternatives. Then we move into that type size and location study. So if it's a bridge, what kind of bridge? What kind of materials would we use? How would it connect to the road system? What does the public want? So those are sort of next steps if we pivot to replacement. Next slide, please. Okay, so I suppose we will turn it right over to Paulina to transition to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Heather. And that was very informative. So unfortunately, I do have to report we're running very late, and we wanted to get as much as conversation and discussion with community task force members. Because this is not about what Mayor Nichols and I think, but it's all about as a collective and what are we going to be recommending Mayor Durkan moving forward. So we're going to be calling your name next because we do want to hear from most of you. We designed today to hear from all of you. However, I don't think that time will allow us to do that. But so there is also something I wanted to recommend, perhaps have another meeting prior, co-chair Nichols and myself meet with the mayor to finalize more of the comments and discussion on this, because we haven't scheduled that. But if we needed to, I'm just gonna put it out there because it is very important for your both co-chairs to hear from every single voice as we are analyzing what recommendations we're gonna be giving. Anything else to add, Greg?
Yes. One of the things that Paulina and I chatted about was the possibility of a meeting next week if we're not able to get through our session today with people feeling that they've been heard and have had a chance to express their concerns and thoughts. So given how late we're running, I'm thinking that that's likely be needed. So that would happen noon next Wednesday. And that would be something that Paulina and I would call as opposed to SDOT. And it would be just an open conversation with any of the task force members who wish to participate to try and get concerns on the table. By then we should have had more information on cost and from the cost benefit analysis. So keep that in mind as we're going through this this part of the agenda.
Also, as we're moving forward, I do want us to remind that we are not going to be concentrating on the next conversation and whether I'm calling your name to say, what do you think we should have replace or rebuild the bridge? The conversation should be enlightening, like, what are those important things that the mayor should consider before she makes the decision? So this community task force is not going to be building a consensus and what do we think whether it should be replaced or rebuilt, but instead, what are the main important issues that we should be covering to the mayor make that recommendation, make that decision. So I'm gonna be calling on your name by alphabetical order. So if you have your name with A, be ready. because we really want to hear from you. We're not going to be splitting into groups. We thought this would make it better as a holistic discussion, as in a collective discussion, and how any comments, questions, brainstorming that you want to do with the group.
Paulina and Mayor Nichols. So if we did do round robin and acknowledging that not everybody might use their time, that would still be about 45 minutes. And people have allotted time for an additional half an hour. So is either a decision about going over to 30, or if we want to use the balance of the time for this CBA panel where task force members could ask questions directly of Barbara, of Heather, of Matt, of Greg Izzo, and we could run the clock out that way, and then use the next conversation, whether that's next Wednesday at noon or something, to then do that round robin. Perhaps there would be more time for that. Just putting that out as we sort of hash this out in real time.
Okay, that's a great suggestion. As we're shaping the best way that we can gather, maybe it's better right now to allow this Q&A for the next 29 minutes that we have. So there's two options, and I would like you to put in the chat. The number one is, do we do a round robin? Or number two is, do we allow for Q&A? And I would like to hear from you, what do you prefer? So number one, do we go for Q&A? Number two, round robin. Okay, I'm seeing majority responding that we should allow for Q&A, and I did see some of the questions already being presented, Michael. So
yeah,
like
we have order
question
carrying forward from previous hands raised, and Mayor Nichols, I'll turn it over to you first if you want to kick us off. But in order of questions from previous round, it's Jen Temple, then Commissioner Steinbrook, for the first two questions after Mayor Nichols.
Well, I think there are a lot of questions that we all have, and we're in a very difficult spot in that we don't have any specific numbers. So alternative, and I'm focusing on alternative 2 and alternative 4. So Greg, I'm asking we've got the little stars, the dollar signs, and alternative 2 capital cost is $1 sign, I believe, and alternative 4 is 4. Does that mean it's 4 times the capital cost, or is it some other kind of comparison, some other scale?
It wouldn't be representative of the number of times the capital cost. So in other words, it wouldn't be like you said. It would be. I will say that alternative 4 compared to 2 is probably in the range of 5 to 8 or 5 to 10 times the cost of alternative 2.
Okay, so it's not a direct line.
It is not.
Is that true on the maintenance side as well?
The maintenance side, what I just said would not be as true on the maintenance side. I think from what I could tell on the maintenance, let me just talk about alternative 2 compared to alternative 4 on the maintenance side. Alternative 4, half the cost of the maintenance of alternative 2. That relationship
That's assuming a 40-year life for the repair?
Well, assuming a 40-year life for the repair, correct. It would be half. It would be double the cost of alternative 4 when it comes to maintenance of alternative 2. Yes,
right.
Over 40.
But because the capital cost is so much lower, the present value you said would be about the same.
Exactly. Overall, the ownership cost in the end would come very close to the same.
Thank you, Paulina. I've got lots more questions, but I'm going to pass it on for our next panelist.
Can I jump in there really quickly, just on the issue of cost, because I know it's come up in a number of contexts.
Say your name.
Oh, Sam Zimbabwe, SDOT director. Thanks, Deb, for keeping me honest. I know it factors very heavily into how the task force members are thinking about this, because we're talking about big numbers regardless of which alternative we pursue. I want to ground people in that at this point, we're trying to make comparisons across these different alternatives at a 0% design level. So we are, I think it's very difficult, and any number that we would put out right now would likely be incorrect on especially on sort of the capital cost. So I think the relative scale of these costs is more important and more valuable for this discussion at this point than it is to get really focused on hard numbers and sort of what the funding plan might be and who's going to chip in for which alternative.
Okay.
So I get the desire for some real certainty. The level of design that we're able to do in this accelerated CBA process, and as we go into, that is going to be something that's going to have to evolve on, regardless of which pathway we're on, over time as we go forward with design, because we are at the 0%. Like these are really very conceptual at this point.
Right, and what I'm trying to get at with my question, Sam, and is 4 years of our life without that access and the impact on the West Seattle community, on the more southerly communities that are experiencing the effect of all of us trying to get places from West Seattle. That 4 years is very valuable to us. So the repair option looks very attractive from that standpoint, but we don't really know the numbers on what it will cost. What we know, kind of what the risks are. All of us have done home remodeling, and we know when you open up a wall, you don't really know what you're going to get. But you guys have also opened up a lot of walls on that bridge and know a fair amount about it. So I'm just trying to get a sense of the repair. We now know is technically possible. We know that from you, and we know that from the TAP. But if it makes sense, then it's far preferable than going through another 5 or 6 years of not having that important connection. So that's all I'm trying to get to, and it's hard with the level of information that we have to really give good advice to the mayor, other than be very careful, which I know she was going to be anyway. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I'll shut up and let the questions and answers go. I will just say that that type of feedback is exactly what will be helpful, I think, for us and the mayor as we go through this. The challenges that folks face, the that if there is a priority on restoring the connection as soon as possible, making sure that is clear. I will say, and we've said this as well, that the repair option does come with more uncertainty about when a future closure would come. So if that is relatively more important than if the speed of connection is relatively more important than the certainty, then that's important, but it's going to be hard for us to guarantee both. And so really understanding what the priorities are from the task force is where I think we get a lot of value from all of the voices that are part of this group. So I'll be quiet like I usually am at these meetings and let you all deliberate.
Thank you, Sam. Yes, we do have quite some folks that have raised their hands. So we're gonna go with Dan Temple, followed by Annie Guerra so far.
Thank you. Jen Templin again from West Seattle Bridge Now. I wanted to just pick up where Mayor Nichols had left off, and I would say our position is absolutely, if we can repair, and we've heard that it will be safe, and we've heard that it can last for 15 to 40 years, given the cost to the community of waiting any longer, there's the choice seems fairly obvious from that standpoint. What we haven't encountered here, there's been no economic modeling done, which I don't really understand why that couldn't have been done in parallel over the past 5 months. It would not have been that big of a lift to estimate what it would take and what it's going to cost the community to be out of mobility, truly not connected, the impact on our businesses, the impact on the communities that are going to be, stuck in traffic, on families, on not being able to get medical care and to the access, people's communities, people who are going to have to leave this community, have to sell their homes, probably at a lower price than they would have, property values. There are so many economic costs to this community. And that really needs to be a factor. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Jen. So, and these will be also perfect modeling for the conversation we need to have next week. If you don't have a question, but mostly a comment, let's use the time to ask the people who presented, our experts, to fill on those questions you have. So, Anne?
This is Ann Higuera. I'm a business owner in West Seattle. Greg, I have a question for you, and it's about the sequencing of the work that would be done if you, there were several mentions of repairing the bridge, and then at some point you would do the replacement and you would have to shut down again. But there wasn't any time frame given for that. So if I'm looking at those slides and I see the superstructure replacement has a total construction time of about 3.5 years, or 4 years, are we looking at that being the amount of time we wouldn't have to start from zero? We could actually shut down and do the replacement then. Is that correct?
If you're correct, your question correctly, the service life would begin in 2026 for, say, alternative 4. So as soon as the construction is complete and traffic's put up back on the bridge, that's when the service life begins for the bridge structure.
Understood. But if we did a repair first, and we were going to do a replacement, so we do all of the advanced planning knowing that we'll have to do that in the future. Are we looking at a shortened timeline? So yes, if we start now when we replace, we're at 6 years. But if we start now when we repair, we get going again in 2 years, and then we plan for a replacement down the line. Is that timeline shut down for 4 years then? Approximately. I know that these are all round numbers. Or are we looking at another 6 years in the future? So if we have to shut down again in the future, are we looking at 6 more years?
It would depend on what kind of replacement we selected, which is the same as today. And it would depend on what kind of delivery mechanism. 4 to 6 years is what we're thinking about in terms of alternative 4. But I also just want to highlight that alternative 4 is a very specific kind of bridge replacement. There are other ways that we could do superstructure replacement. So I think what Sam was trying to, and successfully maybe, is what's important to know is speed, certainty. Would you rather have it open and then closed and then open again, or would you just rather have it closed and then open forever? Like, so it's less about, I mean, ultimately the numbers are a problem to solve. The question is more about the community's values. So, if we could do this faster, would that matter? Or is it just, nope, we want to reuse the structure that we have now? So that's what we're trying to get at, and that's what's going to be helpful to the mayor.
Great. Thank you, Anne and Heather. Let's go with Peter Goldman and then Peter Stamberg was first and then Peter Goldman.
Thank you. I can't help but feel that the conversation with Mayor Durkin fell short, and because we didn't have this cost benefit information in advance of hearing from her and having the opportunity to comment and ask questions that would be more informed by what we're learning now. So that's just a comment and a little bit of disappointment there. I know there'll be some future opportunity. I'm not clear how this process, the community task force process, will actually inform the mayor's decision-making, not respond to a decision that's already been made in a way. I don't see where we have the opportunity to actually help inform the mayor's decision-making once we have this cost-benefit analysis in the fullest level of detail and more information. And obviously there's a lot of information we still lack, a lot of uncertainties and going forward. But I want to feel at the end that this process that we've devoted now 10 meetings to, a lot of time, staff, and so forth, is going to result in something meaningful with regard to the decision-making process. I can't help but feel that the repair option 2 in this case is being shortchanged on a couple levels. It's been referenced that option provides uncertainty, may not extend the life, may not fully do the job. And we still don't have the forensic understanding as to what caused the structural failure in the first place that is definitive based on the most qualified expertise going into it. So that leaves us a little bit lacking confidence in an alternative that we don't know is going to fix the problem. And likewise, it seems to me that there's more than one option here that is represented that could be viable, and such as a repair reinforcement or a repair plus alternative, so alternative 2 plus, that would allow the bridge to reopen sooner with reliability, at least in the short term, and potentially be extended with additional upgrading structurally and seismically to extend it to the life it should have had in the first place, which was 75 years. No bridge should be constructed for less than a life than 75 years. And we've only got 35 good ones out of this. So I would, sometimes these analyses can lead to a hybrid, and I want to suggest that that should be something that can be considered a hybrid option that takes some of the best responses here and puts them in a new form. I'm not sure where the questions are in that, but there are certainly questions. I also have trouble with what I hear as an inconsistency between what was verbally stated with regard to funding options as not being equal, but then your matrix of attributes shows them as equal across the board 1 through 5. I don't believe that's a fair assessment. I think that there are clearly different funding sources when it comes to full replacement versus patchwork repair, which can be made more challenging in pursuing funding at different levels of government. So but I hear two different things being said, from this attributes matrix to what was presented verbally to us on funding. And that is a driver. There's no question that funding is always a driver. So that's all. I'll stop there.
So Commissioner Steinbrook, a couple of things. First of all, just remember that attribute table came out of the cost benefit analysis. SDOT is also bringing our expertise to the table. And so that's where you may see a difference between funding. There's a realpolitik element here that we totally recognize. I really think it would be a great idea if Barbara Moffett, if you're still here, Barbara, could you speak to the forensic question that keeps showing up?
I'd be glad to. Hi, this is Barbara Moffett, co-chair on the TAP. And that's an interesting question. And I think I saw an earlier question as well asking, do we know what we're fixing? That was a question that we had put out, months ago when we first came and joined the CTF. And I believe that the answer is yes, we do know what we're fixing and we can fix, which is why we have stated that from a feasibility point of view, technically we are able to engineer this to fix it. So at the time, I'll probably go into more details than you care to know, we were suspecting that there could be a shear failure at joint 38, which could be a catastrophic failure collapse mechanism. Since that time, the analysis that has been done and the modeling that's been done has developed what the actual potential failure mechanism is by doing more of a strut and tie type of model and understanding the interaction of both the flexure and the shear components with it. So I don't want to get into all of the nuances of that, but we do have the analytics behind understanding why and what occurred. And so from a forensic point of view, I don't know that it is fair to say, well, we don't know what we're repairing. We would know what we are repairing and could repair that. I think the caveat I had stated earlier was that with an aging structure, we're almost halfway through its original expected life expectancy, it could be having other issues that arise. And so that is the uncertainty, not with the current level. With respect to retrofitting or upgrading it and bringing it up to say the current seismic standard, there could be an issue with that with respect to Alt 2. And the main reason is because you have an existing structure that was built to a certain level of seismic resiliency. Granted, in the 1980s, this was ahead of its time, a fantastic seismic design that was done on this. However, since the 1980s, there have been two changes in the seismic, I guess, design criteria. One is that the seismic maps have all been updated. And in addition to that, whereas a normal classification, so there's different classifications, that normal classification was for no collapse under a 475-year earthquake, we now have a no collapse under 975 being the normal status. So you look at the seismic resiliency, there's three categories, and that is a policy decision by SDOT that others can speak to better, but you have a normal, an essential, and a critical seismic resiliency. Each one has a different level of what will happen after a seismic event. At a certain point, when you have an existing pier, you have existing foundations, you have existing ground improvements, you have an existing superstructure, there's only so much you can do. It is very doubtful you could get it up to the highest critical level of seismic resiliency by a retrofit. There's question on whether you could get it up to an essential. Could you bring it up to the current normal? Our TAP is feeling pretty confident you could, and that is a no collapse under 975. That is still in early development, but to your question, there is a certain limiting factor by the fact that you have an existing structure on what you can do to retrofit or repair it further. So I hope that helps clarify some of the technical aspects of it.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it. And just to respond very quickly to Commissioner Sandberg about how we're going to get the feedback back, there's no way that we would sign up for getting just feedback after the decision. We are going to make sure that all these comments, feedback that we're getting, the mayor gets prior to the decision that she makes. And this is why we're having an extra meeting that we could all act as community task force to go over it and make sure everybody has a say on it. So I would like to call Peter Goldman, and we're going to close it with Charlie Abel. Unfortunately, we need to do some next steps understanding and what is going to happen next week. So Charlie, sorry, Peter and Charlie. Peter, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I want to thank Paulina for saying that, and I agree with Peter Steinbruck, and I won't repeat what he just said. I do want to make a couple of comments, though, on the tunnel alternative. I think that for us to really consider that alternative, we need some correct numbers. There are a few things that I'm concerned about. I just felt that for terms of the dollars and time, the Fraser River ITT proved that it could be done much quicker and almost at the same as a bridge. Soil dredging, I think there's just anecdotal argument about soil disturbance in the river. The port already does a lot of dredging every year and will be doing a lot of dredging around Terminal 5. So I think we have to use we have to really think about this and not just do anecdotal environmental analysis. I also think it's a big decision for someone to have made to say, well, we're not going to put Sound Transit in a potential tunnel because it wouldn't work there. We would need to cast it somewhere else. That's the first I've heard of that. One of the benefits is putting the tunnel Sound Transit in the same tube that are the same ITT. But I also want, but most importantly, I do want to applaud the mayor for really thinking long-term. I'm sure it's a really hard decision between thinking long-term for what's best for the region and everything, and as opposed to restoring traffic right away to West Seattle. And I live in West Seattle, so I do understand the difficulty of that decision, but I do want to applaud her for what I felt was sort of taking a long view here, which is not always easy for folks elected on 4-year cycles to do. So I do really appreciate her long view, but I think we just have to make sure we are comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and we don't eliminate an alternative with anecdotal, oh, it's going to be too expensive, oh, it's going to be too environmentally harmful, oh, it's going to be not, you know. I think we have to, we owe the city a little bit more precise reasoning than we've received if we're really going to provide input. Thank you.
Barbara, would you like to take that one?
I'll take the first shot and then ask everyone else to join in who would like to. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the question, particularly about the tunnel. One thing I would like to state is that this decision by Mayor Durkan is repair or replace. Repair being alternative 2, replace being alternatives 4, 5, and 6, the tunnel. So if it is a replacement decision is made, it would include the potential for a tunnel. So keeping in mind that the CBA is looking at the cost benefit analysis and in not choosing between 4, 5, or 6, that is something that a type size and location would include. And that, as Heather had mentioned, has to be done at each of the for any federal funding. So it would be included as part of that and be considering. With respect to Sound Transit, one of the issues that is difficult is that they have you're coming in from both sides down to the tunnel's actually the low point. So from a grade perspective, to put Sound Transit in there could potentially increase the length of the tunnel or the approaches in order to be able to meet grades and put it through the tunnel. You also have fire life safety to consider. So you're going to be having, with it being at the low point of the two entrance and and egress, you're going to have a pump station. You're going to have cross passages and ventilation and a maintenance. The maintenance costs in themselves can be for a tunnel a full-time staff that is looking at all of that from an electrical, mechanical. So after you've done your CFD analysis, where are your cross passages? How do you get it out? If you put Sound Transit in there, how are they actually going to be able to get out into the main tunnel in order to have an egress in a fire situation? So there's a lot of considerations for that. From a casting yard perspective, you will be limited on width of structure. So although it's very nice to look at a streamlined, okay, let's get this all reduced and maybe pretend that some jet fans can work and not have any ventilation requirements above and below. These, as you start getting into the actual needs from a ventilation point of view, from the fire life safety, structures in tunnels tend to grow a bit. And if you're looking at grades and trying to say, let's put Sound Transit in there, that could be something that may not be desirable in the future, because if a tunnel is chosen, it may be better not to have it, maybe better to have it. So those are things that a type size and location study really would be fleshing out. We have received some very preliminary costs on the tunnel so that we could enter it into the CBA, but they are not definitive yet. They have, they have a lot of factors on them, and they would be refined in a TS&L. So I would really caution to say that it's not being thrown out, or all of these dollar signs are saying we're not even going to consider it. Again, the entire CBA, the entire decision has to be repair 2 or 4, 5, and 6, the replacement. So that might help a bit with that. Were there outstanding questions that I didn't answer? I was sort of taking notes, but I might have missed one.
Yeah. Heather, do you have something to add to that before I call on Charlie? No? Okay. Thank you, Barbara. So let's hear from Charlie.
Thanks. I'll try and be extremely brief. Just following up on Anne and Jen's comments and questions, I'm not sure I heard a clear response from SDOT, but should should we be assuming that a 4 to 6 year closure of the bridge will be required either now in a replacement scenario, options 4, 5, and 6, or in 15 to, let's say 15 to 40 years in a repair scenario? Is there basically in any scenario a closure that will be needed?
I believe I could help respond to this one. As we say, for instance, we do choose repair, and we continue down the route of repair. We would also concurrently be going down the route of replacement, and that would be going through our planning exercises, going through our alternatives analysis, our TSNL. We would be getting that concurrently out of the way. We would be lining up our permitting. So we would be lining up a lot of things, I guess, as we're going through repair. We would be concurrently lining up all those other activities that would help us accelerate the replacement. So I would feel confident in that we would be able to cut back on the time it would take for that 4 to 6, because essentially we would be doing those activities concurrently while we're going through repair. So we should be able to theoretically dial in that 4 to 6 for a replacement.
Does that mean that it's more like 4, or are we down to like 1 or 2?
Some of that depends on permitting. I wouldn't say 1 to 2. I mean, that's a bit extreme, but I would say we would look at ways of cutting back time. I'm confident we could cut back some of that time, but certainly not down to 2. Again, permitting is an issue we would have to deal with.
I think actually Ann Higuera asked that question. And so obviously, whether we are repairing now and then eventually replacing or replacing now, we would look for options that help us compress that schedule as much as we can. And that is exactly what the type, size, and location study would be for.
Yeah, I guess I'm not trying to get at a number. I'm just trying to clarify, like Jen's comments were all about the impacts to the Seattle community. And I just want to be clear that I'm understanding SDOT correctly, that at some point this bridge will have to be shut down again.
Correct.
Yes,
So
it would need to be shut down for both the demolition and then the reconstruction in a replaced scenario. I think there are very limited options for building an off alignment replacement that would be able to be done entirely concurrently. And so there would be a period, as Greg said, we would try to compress that as much as possible. But I think for comparison's sake, at this point, it is fair to assume that there would be a similar construction period as we're talking about in a replacement option that would be necessary for a repair and then the replacement in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And since I have asked you to stay for 5 more minutes, I'm sorry we can continue having this Q&A, but Michael, can you please walk us through the next steps, including meeting next Wednesday, please?
You bet. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for your grace and patience. It's something that we all need a little bit more of every minute of every day in the midst of all of this. So thank you. We will follow up in an email, a comprehensive note as it relates to scheduling for a follow-on conversation next week, but also a way to facilitate some of the questions that you have now so that we don't lose those, but also so that we can work through some of that churn and be a little bit more efficient in our time in conversation next week. So we will send that note. I don't want to put a rubber stamp on times right now because I saw a lot of chats about challenges that abound for Wednesday or any other day next week. So we will sort through that in a follow-up note that will probably come from Bill, but we will pin down a time for conversation, additional conversation next week. And we will provide opportunity for some of the questions that are raised today so we can try and work through some of that and bring answers and efficiency to our next conversation. So with that, thank you everybody for the patience and grace in our 10th task force meeting. And I guess we'll have a 10, this is 10A and we'll come back together for 10B next week. So thanks everybody and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks everybody for your patience and your engagement, and see you next week.
Thanks.